Okay. Hi, everybody. We're here today with Suzannah Baum. Suzannah, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation around the importance of communication and presentation skills. So welcome.
Me too. I'm very much looking forward to it. So thank you, Samantha.
So you have a really interesting background. You'd shared with me a little bit of, having worked in marketing in the past, and now you're a trainer, a coach, a keynote speaker, and an author. So do you want to there you go. And I want to get into your book a little bit later on as well. Do you want to kind of just give us a quick overview of, give us your elevator pitch, actually, in terms of who you are and what you've done in your career?
Yes. Well, I mean, the elevator pitch, it's, as you said, I'm a presentation and communication skills trainer, executive speech coach, and a conference speaker, a keynote speaker. So I help people deliver more structured, more engaging presentations that really resonate with their audiences so that they could step out with more visibility, more credibility, more authority, and really share their message, get to share their voice, share their message, and not feel held back because of nervousness or overwhelm or not even knowing where to start. Right. So the journey started not at all in this way. The journey started, I have a commerce degree in marketing and international relations, if you could believe it, but did not go in that route. And so I spent a lot of my early career in marketing and copywriting, terrified of public speaking, really, and trying to avoid every opportunity that came upon me or every opportunity that was sort of thrust on me by a boss. I did everything I could to make excuses to get out of it, to say I didn't really have the information. And the problem was that the more I did that, even though I knew that I was really quite good at my jobs in marketing, the more I would sort of get overlooked, and the more people stopped coming to me for questions, for their needs. And I felt that the visibility in my company was dropping. And even we got to a point where my boss said, listen, unless you're willing to like step up and share what's going on in the department, like we can't really promote you. We can't give you those raises you want because you're hiding a little bit. So with a little bit of dragging myself, I dragged myself to Toastmasters, actually on the advice of a cousin of mine who lived in California, who was in sales, and he was incredibly successful. And he said Toastmasters is really what helped him understand how to navigate communication and navigate confidence in communication. And I joined that. I mean, this was a long time ago. We're going back to like 2001. Okay. But it was really the first time I actually went. I walked in. They made me introduce myself, and that was enough for me to go, nope, not coming back. Nope. And I didn't come back for 6 months. And then afterwards, but the frustrations build and build and build. And eventually, and that's why frustrations can be really a good thing, because they built to the point where I was like, okay, I'm sick of this now. Now I have to feel a little uncomfortable going into a place with people I don't know, because I need to do something, because I'm meant for better than this. And I'm meant for being more than constantly overlooked, because I don't want to speak up. So it just was a place filled with supportive individuals who really push and push and push. And somewhere along the way, somewhere about 6 months in, I was kind of struck with just this flash of, I gave my first outside presentation as part of Toastmasters, but outside the group. And after that evening, it was like something just ignited in me that was just like, you got to do more of this. And how do you do this for a living? Now that took another, many years to figure that out, but it was the spark, and it was that moment of clarity finally that I was like, oh, I think this is what I'm supposed to be doing. But I just want to say that the thing that caught me the most, the thing that caused that moment, was speaking in front of this audience of maybe 30 people. It was a short presentation, but there were these a bunch of professionals, but these two people sitting in front of me who pulled out their notepads and started to write down what I was saying. And that moment, if I could trace it back to any moment, it was that moment where I was like, do you mean what I'm saying is valuable enough that these people are writing it down? Like, wow. And that was it. That was the moment I said, this is it. Something just changed.
But I find it so interesting, and thanks for being vulnerable and sharing that experience, really that experience in terms of, maybe being overlooked for promotions, because I think that's something that happens to a lot of people. It certainly happens in recruitment, right? When candidates, even at the senior level, when they're being interviewed, well, probably especially at the senior level, if they cannot be concise and to the point and articulate their accomplishments or highlight certain situations, they will be overlooked for certain key roles, because the feeling will be that they're unable to get their thoughts across or to motivate a team to the degree that the organization requires it. So I think that's so interesting.
Yeah, well, the question at interviews when people say, well, tell me about yourself, and that's not necessarily licensed to just go talking about yourself for 5 minutes. It really, or 10 minutes or 15 minutes. They want to know about you for sure, but they also want to know, well, how will you fit into their world? What do you know about their world? What do you know about them as a company, and how you can integrate into their culture and their world? So I think that's one thing that I hear a lot, is even with some of my clients who are on the interview trail, that sometimes they present these big PowerPoints because they are higher level executives. They present these PowerPoints because someone said, I'll give you a half an hour. And they're like, well, I have to tell them everything that I've done, everything that I've accomplished, what I'm doing now. And it's a lot of information that doesn't get them the result of a callback. Right. And that's what we want. What is the result? We need a callback. We want someone to be interested, but just talking about yourself, straight yourself, isn't actually the way to get to the key of what they need to hear as well, which is how are you and your skills going to fit into who we are.
And I find it interesting too, even when we think back to communicating your experience in a resume, for example, people have the tendency of kind of vomiting out this laundry list of this is everything I did. And every resume looks the same. It's just bullet point after bullet point after, versus this is what I was hired to do. And these were my accomplishments, right? And kind of backing it up with numbers, right? Reduced, X by Y and increase this by that. And so they're not necessarily doing that. So I find that, well, let me share here. I want to share some stats that I had shared with you previously, but maybe some folks here would be interested. So according to expertmarket.com, 86% of corporate executives, educators, and employees cite ineffective communication and poor collaboration as reasons for failures in the workplace, right? So I'm going to share 4 stats. Employees who feel their voice is heard in the workplace are almost 5 times more likely to feel empowered to deliver their best work. And maybe you can comment on this after. Yep. 28% of employees cite poor communication as a reason for not being able to deliver work on time. I think that's really important. And this, communications barriers could be costing businesses around $37 billion a year. Now, keep in mind, these are US stats, and this was pre-pandemic. So I think the numbers have just gone up, right? But certainly, I see it like even in training, right? Like if you go to, I don't know, your local, let's just say coffee shop. I went the other day and I was waiting at the drive-through and the person came on the speaker and said, yeah, hello. I'm like, am I calling your home? I'm like, hi, what happened to, hi, welcome to, Can I take your order? And so to me, that was like a training piece. It's so important in terms of how you're communicating with your customers. I just wanted to drive off. Where am I? Huge pain. Hi. Yeah. So what do you think about some of the stats that I shared? Like what's kind of, what are your thoughts?
So let's look at the idea of communication, poor communication being a barrier to success, a barrier to other people being able to complete their projects. Because we're not only looking at they're not presenting or explaining things clearly enough, although that is obviously one of the issues, is what is that, what do you need to get across to the audience? What is that 1 or 2 critical pieces of information? Because one huge problem is just, number 1, too much information. Like here's the laundry list. Like you said, I'm just going to vomit all of the information you need to know. So one common problem with a lot of my clients, and even not with my clients, which is why I think it's a bigger problem, because we fix that with my clients, but it is so easy to present data. right? It is easy. You stand up, you drop this information on your audience. Here's what I want to tell you, point, data, statistic, information, data. Not at all interesting to the audience, right?
Right.
So how do you then make information interesting to your audience, but not just interesting to the audience, but how do you make them care about what you're talking about? How do you make them care because they see how it affects their job? Like, again, not just the company, but their job, and how they can accomplish what it is that they need to accomplish. So there's a lot of critical elements here. Is there's too much information. There's presentation communication that is just data driven.
Right.
Let me just spit it out to you, and you take what you need and leave the rest. No. Like, you as the speaker, the presenter, the trainer, everything's important. Everything you say needs to be important, needs to be relevant, needs to be meaningful, and you have to figure out a way to make that meaningful. It doesn't necessarily mean your PowerPoint slides have to have more pictures of puppies on them, or rainbows, or babies, or whatever. It means, like, what does this information mean to the audience? Why should they care about it? How will it make their life easier? How will it help them accomplish their goals? How will it help them work better within their team, get the results they want? And also the results that people want are varied, because every audience, people, like, we can't always assume that you're sitting in front of an audience who wants results. Everybody wants it. No, some people, what does the result look like? For some people, it's get this job done. For other people, it's work within a team. It's have fun.
Or how do I fit in? How does my department fit into this big picture, right? So you and I had spoken last week or whatever it was about, so I had shared that we had a client years ago, Fortune 100 company. We were sourcing out a VP of finance for them. And this client had said, what makes our organization work well is the fact that the finance department is able to get the numbers to talk. They tell a story. So we can't bring somebody in to lead the finance team who isn't able to coach their people on that, but also who they need to be able to really demystify. So what does that number mean? And why, to your point, why should we care? So even if whether you're talking to, the CEO, or you're speaking with internal or external stakeholders, or the receptionist, in terms of, hey, this is what this number really means. Let's unbox that, and let me tell you a story around what that number means. Then it becomes more captivating, and people are able to retain that information in a different way.
Yes, absolutely. What is the story behind the number? And where does this number come from? And what does it mean? And what does it mean to the company? What does it mean to us? And how we move forward as a company or in this department? And explaining, right, it is creating meaning behind the numbers.
Yeah. So this brings me to a completely different kind of, not topic, but a thought that I have in terms of, I've noticed a big difference in terms of the content that's even on LinkedIn, right, with respect to storytelling. And it seems that there's this movement for people to want to engage with the content. Tell us about the story, right? Not just the fact or the figure, or, kind of this just happened, but we want to hear about a story. So how important is storytelling in communication?
Oh, like, the obvious answer is yes, storytelling is very important in communication, but how, right? How do we integrate the story into what we're saying? And, even with how I teach people how to build better presentations and create the connection, most stories start with, well, like, here's a problem, right? Who is the main character in this? And that main character could be the company. It could be a person. It could be you. There's the avatar and the problem that they are having. And it kind of has to start like that, where we really dig into, what is the problem? Why is it a problem? What is the result of this problem? So that we can create that connection with our listeners, so that they can relate to the problem. They could see why this is a problem. They could see the emotional undercurrents of it, even, because in going straight to a solution, we don't have any connection to what is the outcome of a problem. So really, with any presentation, we hear the concept of, what are your pain points? But really, what are the pain points? So if we're talking about, for example, your customer has a problem, or even your company, and what problem does your company solve? Well, that's great, they solve the problem, but we really have to get underneath and dig out, what is the problem? Why is this a problem? What happens as a result of this problem, so that we can really then examine the solution and everyone's on board to solve it, right?
It's such a great point, because a lot of times we found that employees become very disconnected or disengaged when leaders just tell them, like our parents did growing up, right? Do this because I told you to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I don't know about you, but like I can't just tell my kids, like, just do it. But why? There's no guest coming over. Why do I have to make my bed now? Why can't I do it later, right? And not at all saying that employees are children, but it's that switch in terms of frame of mind, where it used to be a very kind of telling environment, like you just tell your people to go and do something and they do it. And now it's, hey, we need to get this done and this is why. So in communicating the why, what are some things that leaders can do to kind of communicate that why better to their employees?
Well, it's and I will answer that question, but it reminds me of one of my customers who actually made it into a case study in my book, who was this super successful, was a large multinational company. And I mean, the guy really knew what he was doing. Head of the company, chief operating officer, really was on top of everything. Great personality, very outgoing, loved public speaking. He hired me because I love public speaking, no issues with confidence. I love it. But for some reason, when I get to the corporate presentations that talk strategy, I get a little bit bored. And he goes, and I can tell they're bored. I can tell they're bored too. So how can I create some movement? Because people say, yeah, I'll do it. Great idea. Okay, I'll do what you're asking me to do, but then they don't do it. He's like, it's like they say it in the moment because they know I'm the boss and I need to hear it, but then there's no follow through, and there's no follow through because they're not connected to the reason behind, because it is more of a telling, like, here's the strategy, here's what we're going to do. What do you guys think? Yay, boss. Okay, but then nobody really moves forward on it. So he came to me with so that sort of addresses your question. He was like, what can I do? Because I'm fully confident, and that doesn't seem to be enough. I'm like, okay, well, for sure it's not enough, and we can talk about that after. Because confidence really can be irrelevant in cases like this. It's not about your confidence or your nervousness. It's about how are you connecting with the audience, and how are you making them see the value of what you're talking about?
So and action, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, again, it comes down to, yes, we have to put forth the goals of the company, what the company wants to the strategies, the goals, what we're aiming for. But how are we going to get this? How are we going to make it happen? How are we going to get everybody on board and get excited about it? And how do they get excited? Because they see the value, because they're like, oh, great idea. And I can see how that will help me, my team, and third, the company, right? Because it's really about how can I get noticed? How can I be recognized? How can I get the job done? And that's the piece, this personal connection is what's missing. And so when people and employees cannot see the reason behind a strategy, or the reason behind why they have to do something, like your kids, why do I have to do it? Like, no one's coming over. Why? Okay, well, here's a bunch of reasons why it would be relevant for you to do. You will have a clean room. You will get to walk in your room and you will say, wow, that's so happy I accomplished that early this morning. You will feel better. You will, like, it's about addressing the audience from that personal perspective, which is hard because at a high level, we think, well, that's their job. So they just need to do it because that's their job. We're giving them the tools, we're giving them the resources, but here's a strategy, go do it. And
those are some great points though, Suzannah, because when I think about all of it seems like every organization is going through immense change management right now, right? Whether it's change in technology, leadership, vision, culture, you name it. And that seems to be one of the main issues that people get frustrated is around the lack of communication around the change, right? So it's not enough that, oh, we're bringing in this new, ATS or this new HRIS or this new payroll system or this new CRM. tell us why it's different. Why is it going to, make our lives easier? And I think a lot of organizations aren't spending enough time on the why and on communicating at all levels, right? Not just this top down.
Yes. And it is really, again, communicating at all levels to people who have different communication needs. Because some people will say, okay, well, we're implementing this new CRM because it's going to help us get the job done faster, right? We're going to get the job done. We're going to get more work done. This is great. So for people who really love the concept of being productive and getting the job done, this is wonderful. There's a whole other segment of people who are curious about, why do we have to change this? Because what we had before is working. Who am I going to be working with? Where's the support coming from? Is it part of a team? What if I have problems like that? So implementing new strategies is not always, oh, wow, so great. There is always going to be some measure of people in your audience who are like, wait, why are we doing this? How is it going to work? Who am I working with, right? They're not as concerned. Everybody wants to get the job done, be more effective, but how we're going to do that is different for everyone. And so we have to be mindful when presenting that it's not just our way of presenting and what we value as presenters, whether you may be a little bit more focused on getting the job done or focused on making sure the people and the team is happy, supported, have the tools. You know what I mean? You have to speak a different language in your presentation and how you present. And that's how you connect. It means that we have to be more mindful of the cues. We have to be good listeners. We have to ask different questions to understand the bias of our audience so that we can then adapt the language in a way that will be more meaningful for them.
I have a whole list of questions, right, that I wanted to ask you, but you're making me think about something else now. And that is oftentimes, like I remember being in university, for example, and according to my daughter, a lot of that hasn't necessarily changed, where the professor will put up onto the screen their PowerPoint and you're just reading slides the whole time. Right. And we've all been in, corporate presentations as well, where we've had to sit through just slide after slide of like content, and the speaker, the presenter, is just reading off their slides. So what is the magic behind a presentation? How many lines should there be on each slide? Like, do you have any tips in terms of, because I've heard you should only put up an image and only like maybe one phrase, right? And then you have your notes in the back. Like, what do you think makes a great presentation?
You know what? It really depends. I hate to give that answer. It depends. It depends on your level of creativity. It depends on what the content is. I mean, I've been part of those university presentations and corporate presentations that is just no, number, and it saps your energy, right? It's hard to take as a listener. I mean, I know it's almost easier to create that as a presenter because then all of your information is in front of you. You don't have to remember anything. You just read off and get your presentation over with. But that's, again, what is the priority? Is it to stand up at the front of the room and regurgitate what's on a slide? Or is it to get a message across to your audience in a way that is engaging to them, right? And doing that, it's a conscious, I feel like it's almost a conscious choice. The easiest solution is, yes, fill up your PowerPoint slides and just go, but you'll lose your audience. And then it's wasted time for everyone. It's wasted time for you, the speaker who's done it. It's wasted time for the audience. So, I mean, there are some best practices, but in terms of how many slides, some people will say 35 point, it should be a minimum of 35 point font size. It should be clear, white background, not too many colors, not too many moving pieces. We also have to keep in mind accessibility issues, right? Color blindness, things that move around a screen can really be disturbing for some people, disturbing for whatever issues they're dealing with, people who can't see very well. Like, we have to be mindful of these accessibility issues, but at the same time mindful that too much information on a slide is just not good. Your audience will read it. You'll read it. It's boring. Too many. Yeah, exactly. Now, in my book, there's like a whole section of a few sections on, what are some of the best practices for PowerPoint in terms of the colors, in terms of how many points, in terms of, how easy or large or small or whatever. But you can find a lot of this information online. Like over the years, I have also just looked up what are the best practices, and there's the standard font size, colors, and don't put too much, and try to put an image, because an image is however much you can sort of condense your text. Put images, put important statistics, but obviously not too much information, because you just lose your audience, right? You lose them.
So what do you say to people who tell you, I don't have to give presentations at work, so I don't really need to worry about this? What's your advice to them? Visceral response, yeah.
Yeah. So you know what? This does happen, right? That I don't have to worry about that, Suzannah. I don't have to give presentations at work. But the fact is, you don't have to be giving presentations at work to need to know how to communicate effectively with your boss, with your customer, with your team, with anyone who you are interacting with. You need to be able to get to the point, make sure they understand what you're saying, speak in a language that is relevant to them, so that there is still a connection. So even if there's only one person in front of you, you've probably been in these situations where you're with one person and you just speak a different language, and it's constant. You just can't it's not that you can't get along, but you're like, what? Why can't they understand what I'm trying to say?
Right.
And it's right. I mean, we've all like, why don't they get it? But it's not necessarily because they're just trying to drive you nuts. It's often because they're just not wired that way, and they see things from a different perspective. So we really need to be open to, who are they? How do they need to hear a message? And how can I, because I am now mindful of needing to connect with someone, how can I change my language to be more meaningful and connect with them a little bit better, so that I could get my point across to them, and we can move forward together and not move forward in a more frustrated way where we're not communicating.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
There's always the situation where people are in a team meeting and they want to speak up and they want to share a point, and maybe it's on their mind, and then somebody else in the meeting shares the point that they wanted to make, and they think, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I? Right. So 2 questions for you. Is confidence enough to be able to speak up? And how do you get over the jitters of being able to speak up in a meeting if you're just not somebody who's comfortable speaking in front of others in that way?
Okay. So the first thing, the jitters, you may actually never really get over the jitters. Like, the jitters sometimes are there, depending on what group you're in front of. They can hit you differently, right? You may be in front of one group and you feel fine, and then you hit another group and there's that one person who just makes you nervous, and then you have jitters. So it's not, we can't ever expect to go into a situation thinking, okay, I have mastered my nerves. Let's take the blue pill, the red pill. I'm going to just take the blue pill that cures me of all confidence issues. So it's really a matter of, how do we manage it and prepare, assuming that we may still feel nervous about things. We still may not have optimal confidence, but push ourselves still to speak up, because we need to share our expertise. Everybody has this the expertise, the insights to really create value. And it is so frustrating when you're the one in the audience going, okay, I'm not, or in the meeting, I'm not going to say it. They're going to think I'm an idiot. Like, no, it's a dumb question. It's a dumb statement. And someone else says it. And you're like, ugh.
Yeah.
Like, that was my
says, that's a great question. I'm so glad you asked it. Like,
that was my moment to be the person asking the great question. Yeah. But
okay.
But we lose it.
We have like a minute left, and we've got a couple of questions that have come up. Well, actually, one in particular. So Sophie is saying, she's asking, any tips on reading the room in a digital setting? Love that. How do you read the room?
Yeah. So you know what? That's a great question. Great question, Sophie. It is tough, right? When you're virtual and then all these faces pop up, and how can you read the room? Especially because many people will watch your presentation with a blank face. Right? They're just blank. So how can you read the room? You can't always read the room. I mean, there's no magic thing to be able to understand what they're thinking and what they're feeling. So really, your best bet is to do as much research as you can beforehand, so that you can understand this not about the audience, because again, we may not always know who's coming in to the room, but we can understand our topic and how different people may interact and how they may feel about the topic and your expertise or whatever it is, whatever insight you're sharing, to understand the different problems people may have, the different blocks they may have, so that you could speak about your topic in a way, in several different ways and several different approaches, to try to really create that connection with the group of, either people who are watching you with blank faces, or they're behind a black screen because they don't even turn their camera on.
Oh,
the best you can do then is really focus on the message and create a lot of like different aspects of the message that really can address different needs.
Fantastic. We're out of time. 30 minutes and 31 seconds. That went so fast. Suzannah, how do we get a copy of your book, by the way?
This book?
Yeah.
This book? Yeah. This is the author copy. That's why there's like a little band over here that is not for resale, because it's almost for sale.
Is it online? Where do we go?
It is almost online. Almost. You could, on my website, there will be a new page on my website very shortly. If you just go to SuzannahBaum.com, I will make it fairly obvious. Again, you're reaching me at a time we're weeks away from it. So we're just building all of the pages. The pre-sale of the books is starting on September 22nd, which I will plaster that all over my social media.
And check your website.
Exactly. And then the launch is October 13th, the official launch. It's going to be on Amazon. It's, again, going to be all over my social media. There it is, on my website.
Thank you so much for your time. This was really so informative. I really appreciate it. And thank you. And best of luck with the book sales, and congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Samantha. This was wonderful. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for your time.
Bye,
everybody. Yay.